Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. This line comes from a poem by Mary Oliver titled The Uses of Sorrow. And although, hear me here, I do not believe that God caused our 12-year-old son to die on church property October 23rd, 2010, just 2 short months after his tiny body carried the crucifer in opening day at a sanctuary my husband and I had the pleasure and privilege of helping to rebuild, a church that was ravaged by Hurricane Katrina, relocated 5 miles north, and was worshiping less than 50 people in a makeshift trailer when the bishop decided to give this clergy couple that was very young a great opportunity. You love those, huh? And that night, over 600 people were there when Jeremy's body was broken and his blood seeped deep into the earth, and we witnessed it. No, God did not do this thing to Jeremy or to our family, but I do believe that even in death, along with all life, God can take our brokenness and offer us back a beautiful gift. So as a result, my husband bore this sort of double burden that I couldn't fully wrap my head around or understand. He lost a child like me, but he also was bearing the weight of being the senior pastor at a church where any child died on his watch. This sent him into a dark space. We were both in a dark space, but he entered into a 2-year sabbatical. And I thought I was done with children, youth, and family ministry. I was ready to go be a real pastor. But we had to leave this church, and we had to especially move out of the parsonage because the new senior pastor was coming. We had to find a new gig, and again, I was presented with a great opportunity. This great opportunity was just across the bridge in Ocean Springs, the Emerald City we like to call it. It had a great parsonage, a great school system, a great church, a youth program that had seen better days but had the bones and making of a good program in an artsy town that I love. So what's the catch here? Well, my story in some ways is not that unique. This story can be told about many United Methodist churches from coast to coast and town to town. There was a time when we were this, and then this happened, and now we are this. Well, what happened? Well, Hurricane Katrina hit. Well, there was a pastor indiscretion. Actually, there were a few pastoral indiscretions. That new strip mall denominational church moved to town and stole half of our flock. The factories shut down. The neighborhood shifted. The pastor we were sent by the bishop just didn't fit us. We can't keep a youth minister. We can't find a youth minister. We can't pay someone to do youth ministry. But it doesn't really matter because we don't even have any youth anymore, or kids anymore, or money anymore. Somehow, as a denomination, we're moving from vibrant places of ministry into full-out survival mode. Instead of being places to be refueled, to be sent out, to be spent for the gospel, we are now upkeeping mausoleums to hold the memories and artifacts of the good old days. And we war over the little and fleeting precious resources that we have. Sorry, y'all snapping caught me off guard. And I was like, they're snapping, hold on. No, I can't find my place. This is crazy. Okay. Anyways, as a denomination, we're moving into the survival mode. Any new ideas are met with, Pastor, you don't know this area. That's not going to work here. You're going to get ran out of town if you try that. You need to trust us. And so basically, we're preparing to die as a denomination. And so we can stay on this death spiral, or we can choose to believe that possibly our best days are ahead of us, that this too can be a gift of sorts, that God is still in the business of doing wild and wonderful, new and great things in the United Methodist Church. That even in death and dying, if it comes to that we can arise from the ashes a church better than we've ever been. Truth be told, I was feeling too old, too uncool, and just not interested in being back into full-time youth ministry. It also felt kind of like a demotion of sorts, being pigeonholed in that way. But I got in there, I put on my skinny jeans, upped my spark intake, and went on a hunt for any youth this church had ever known. We searched down confirmation rolls and VBS rosters, and the few youth that were still there, we asked them about their friends that used to attend the church, and we planned this retreat for the end of the summer, the road to Damascus. So we're in a Mardi Gras area like New Orleans, and I was like, it would be a great idea to have a Mardi Gras ball to open up this whole thing. We were going to do it in the sanctuary because our sanctuary doubles as a gym, and that was met with a little bit of, you're going to have a Mardi Gras ball in our sanctuary? And I'm like, well, we're coast people. You go to Mardi Gras. Your wife was in Mardi Gras. Yeah, but it's not that. This is in the church. And so I guess I just didn't let that bother me so much, because when you lost a child or had some major tragedy, you've already lost so much. What do you have to lose? And in some ways, isn't the church like that? The United Methodist Church, we are steadily declining. We've lost so much. What is there left to lose? Why not take a risk? So this was a big hit, the retreat and the ball. That winter, we ended up taking 2 56-passenger vans, buses, filled with students up to the mountains. This was unprecedented territory. So we have surpassed the good old days that they remembered of when youth ministry was great and grand. And I was winning the trust of the youth and the community and the parents and building deep bonds and relationships. Things continued to grow over the next years in children, youth, and family ministry. We hired a new kidmin that was awesome. And then we began to notice something as a staff. All these new kids that were plugging in on Sunday nights to our tween ministry and kid ministry and youth ministry were not a part of our worshiping congregation. Their families were not worshiping with us. And so we started examining, like, why are they not coming? We were like, because it doesn't speak their language. And so we crafted a worship service just for them. On the beach, with the ocean in the view, a brief but meaningful service, and then we had breakfast. We worshiped on the beach each Sunday of the summer for 3 summers long, attracting not just youth and their families, but locals, tourists. People biked to church, brought their boat to church and headed out to Horn Island, brought their dogs to church. And then that third summer, we just collectively decided we don't want to go back to the old style of worship. At the same time, our church council had kind of discerned kind of a next step for our church might be exploring a modern worship experience. And so we just decided we're just not going back to that old style. We're going to take this little beach church and we're going to plant it in our existing building, and Live at 1111 was born, keeping that same chill vibe that we found on the beach. Now this is where I got a lot of raised eyebrows, because I found our worship leader leading music in a bar. I can assure you this was a risk, and it was a risk worth taking. I remember an initial conversation with the chair of the SBRC right after our first morning in the building. And he came, he's a nice man, and he was like, MJ, I loved worship. It was awesome. I love the music. I love the vibe. It's so cool. But do you think that you can ask Graham not to wear a ball cap in the sanctuary because it's disrespectful? And as hard as it was for me to stand on it, I was just like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't ask him not to wear a ball cap in the sanctuary. And I did ask Graham's consent to tell this story last week when I was asking him, and I said, I'm going to tell a story about you. And he was like, I'm going to tell you something, MJ. If you would have asked me to take my ball cap off after leading worship for the first time in my life, feeling so vulnerable and uncomfortable anyway and not sure this is what I should be doing, I would have been out. That would have been it. And so now God is doing a transformative work in him. He is witnessing about all that God has done. It's certainly a risk worth taking. Then in 2017, we had the great cookie controversy. Why? It was a doozy. Why are you spending so much money on cookies? I kept saying over and over, we are showing the extravagant hospitality of Jesus. Our cookies should be better than everyone's cookies. Something I realized yesterday while listening to these talks was before I came to lead, I would have said, we are a worship service for everyone. But I realized that's not true. Yes, everyone is welcome, as always, but we haven't done the intentional work that Thomas is doing, creating spaces for all abilities. And we haven't done the work that Chrissy called us to about being aware of people's body. But what we have done is we very intentionally designed a worship experience for young people and people that are turned off by church. The research we did in the planning stages unearthed that if you intentionally create a space that young people want to come to, a byproduct of that is that it also attracts de-churched, unchurched, and seekers. Like staying away from insider lingo, choosing both Christian and secular music. Last Sunday, we opened worship with Collective Soul's Shine. Great grungy version of it. If you didn't know that 90s rock, grunge rock is making a comeback with the teens. We have one of those, it's very large, soft spaces Hannah mentioned yesterday. We call it a playground. Not a lot of praying happens in there. It's more like a very loud and wonderful playground that's hard to preach over sometimes. We also make every Sunday count. Every Sunday is a special Sunday. We were looking at trends and saw that on special days like Easter and Christmas and Baccalaureate, we had these big crowds. And so I literally Googled, how do you make every Sunday special? And this church in Macon, Georgia, a church plant that was doing just that, popped up on my radar. And so we started doing things like Sweet Tea Sunday, a sweet tea station in addition to all the other coffee and nosh greets you. Hot cocoa bar, ugly sweater contest Sunday. And these simple themes add this layer of fun. When new people walk through our doors, they're literally blown away by the fun and friendly and festive attitude and atmosphere. They look around kind of disoriented at first, and they're like, is this for everyone? Like, can I have some of this king cake? We're like, yeah, it's for anyone. What's going on here today? Do y'all always have all this candy? Yeah, we always have all this candy. And it's working. We're changing people's minds about what church can look like. The young and even wiser, de-churched, unchurched, people that thought they were done with church are finding a home with us. And so you might very well call this all a great big production. It takes an army of dedicated volunteers to pull this thing off. But I found solace in something that was said yesterday in one of the breakouts. What is it you were trying to produce? We are trying to produce an environment that specifically young people, but everyone, feels radically welcomed. Our team is so passionate about reaching people for Jesus, they're going to roll out the red carpet to do it. We want to be the place where people can hear the good news, maybe for the first time, or at least in a fresh way, so that they can go out and be the good news for someone else. Don't want you to think this has been easy, or peaches and cream. As we've crafted this worship experience and tried to do this, our passion and energy has been divided, let's just say, on the battlefield. Laity have taken the brunt of this, standing up to opposition that asks questions like, can it just be a little bit more regular? Why does it have to be this weird? Sometimes innovation also scares those that are not trying to innovate, but those that are standing on the edges of the innovation. I get emails, calls, texts, office visits that go kind of like this. I really like your work at 1111, but why does it have to be so, why can't it be a little bit more, Why is there so much food? It seems like a waste. And I'm like, well, because teens like to eat and adults do too. Why is there a playground in the back corner? It's so loud I can't hear. Maybe try sitting on the other side. We've got a big space. You could sit over there. Do you think the teenagers are really paying attention if they're sitting at the tables doodling and drawing? I think they're paying attention just fine. Why do you use secular music? Can you turn the music down a little bit? Actually, it's kind of loud in here. And finally, I just get to the place where I say, as nicely as I can, we have 3 other wonderful worship experiences at our church that might be more for you. We have a great traditional service downtown and 2 praise worshipy kinds of services at this location. So you're welcome to try any of them. And then if that doesn't work, I grab one of our volunteers and I turn them around, and on the back of our t-shirts it says, this is not your mama's service, but she can come too. So what about this box of darkness? I was handed this part of my story, and it continued with me into youth ministry. But now I kind of feel like Esther. You see, God sent me to this church for such a time as this. There's no way I would have been given this wonderful opportunity to create this wild worship had I not first won their trust as their youth pastor. I've sat here soaking in these wonderful stories, and it's helped me clarify and hear and identify my story and my voice. I am called to the work of young people and those that don't feel like they belong in church because God created me to do this work. God created me in this wild way, and I'm not going to tone down anymore. I'm not going to turn down anymore. I'm not going to be embarrassed anymore. I'm not going to feel like I'm a real pastor anymore. I'm not going to shrink back anymore or not let my light shine because others are uncomfortable anymore. I'm done with that. And so what is it that God is calling you to do is the question. It takes sometimes taking a risk, a step of faith. Looking back over 20 plus years of ministry, it's not the risks that I regret, it's not taking the risks. It's being too chicken to throw my net out and see what God can do. Sometimes things flop and it doesn't work, but God shows up in miraculous ways when we are willing to take a kingdom-sized risk. Jesus shows up when we stretch ourselves beyond our own natural capacity being spent for the gospel. When we actually need a loaves and fishes type of miracle is when we get one. Not taking a risk, it's actually a double risk. Things stay the same, and you're haunted by the, well, what if?